The Skeena, Bulkley, Kispiox, Babine, a system of rivers like no other. Threading a rugged paradise, these fertile waters weave an elaborate living tapestry. Here in the pristine wilderness of northwestern British Columbia, life abounds. At the heart of this abundance is the amazing Pacific salmon. World-famous runs of all 6 species fight their way up the Skeena to the very lakes and streams where they were hatched. The watershed contains over 70 wild salmon stocks, each one genetically unique. Salmon are exceptionally sensitive to changes in their habitat and reflect the health or degradation of the environment itself. The ancient progenitor of all Pacific salmon is the steelhead, rarest and most primitive of the salmonids. These extraordinary fish are a biological marvel. They live longer and migrate farther than any other salmon. After spawning, they don't die, but return to the ocean to repeat their migratory cycle. Their striking beauty and fiery spirit make Skeena steelhead one of the world's most treasured game fish. As wild nature is steadily tamed, the steelhead has become a symbol of survival. Salmonids are valued by many kinds of people in many different ways. The renowned runs of Chinook, coho, and steelhead in the Skeena and its tributaries attract anglers from around the world. Native Indians have harvested salmon from these waters for thousands of years. Until recently, their fishery was non-commercial, restricted to providing food for their own communities. The commercial net fishery is by far the largest consumer of salmon. The massive exploitation of species like pink and sockeye sustains a billion-dollar industry. Unfortunately, the commercial nets are indiscriminate. In the course of catching the target species, they also kill vast numbers of other fish migrating to spawning grounds. Over the decades, runs of less abundant stocks have been virtually destroyed.
For all the species of salmon, there are, some stocks that are, some species that are capable of much higher rates of harvesting than others. But, you can't go out and try and catch pink or Chinook salmon and tell the steelhead and the Chinook or the coho, please don't come into the nets. So there's this bycatch of species and stocks that are not as productive that get taken anyway. And certainly, as the years go by, there's more and more of those relatively unproductive stocks that are falling by the wayside.
Steelhead have started to get into trouble, I guess, in the last 10 or 15, 20 years, really badly. In my lifetime, of course, I've seen them change from where they're everywhere until they're a little difficult to find, until they're looking as if they're in trouble. And recreational fishermen, especially sport fishermen, began to cast about for what the cause of it was, and we have appreciated very early that the real cause was the salmon nets, the commercial fishery, the market fishery intercepting the steelhead.
Commercial fish boats have scoured the Skeena River estuary for 100 years. A flotilla of seine boats, trollers, and gillnetters intercept steelhead and salmon migrating upstream. Although today's boats are more powerful, efficient, and expensive than ever before, the technology of the tidewater fishery has changed remarkably little since the early days.
Silvery deep of the beautiful Skeena and Fraser rivers of British Columbia, and out of the coastal waters along the shores of Canada's fair Pacific province, there come each year nearly 250 million pounds of salmon to help feed a hungry world. There are several methods employed to catch these tasty fish, These fishermen use the gill net method, and here we see but a few of a total of 6,000 small boats which do duty in gill net fishing. Gill net is so called because the mesh is so designed that when a fish swims against it, its gills become caught in the mesh.
Historically, the fishing industry has viewed salmon as an inexhaustible resource. One by one, many of the greatest salmon runs in the world have been decimated. Whenever productivity started to fall, boats would simply shift to a new area or a different species. There always seemed to be more of the silver hordes ready to fill the nets. Today, the commercial fleet carries on full steam ahead. Salmon fishing is big business indeed. Thousands of jobs on the decks and in the canneries. Millions of dollars in bank loans for boats and gear. The capacity of the net fleet that musters in Prince Rupert Harbor is bigger than ever, despite the serious decline of coho, chinook, and steelhead in the Skeena. Conservation of tidewater stocks is the responsibility of the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans. After ignoring the steelhead problem for decades, DFO recently pledged to reduce the incidental bycatch by 50% within 3 years. However, DFO has traditionally functioned as a handmaiden to the industry.
We have to balance the needs of the commercial fleet and the sports fishing community, and we are committed to the 50% reduction. How will it go about achieving that in the next 2 years? We have to consult with the commercial fleet and try to find a way that we meet the objective while at the same time minimizing the impact on the commercial fleet.
DFO's prime mandate is to manage the resource for the conservation of stocks before meeting the needs of user groups. Nevertheless, the demands of the industry have reigned supreme at the expense of one stock after another. Unfortunately, overfishing is only one of the threats facing salmon populations. Habitat destruction also takes its toll. Critical spawning grounds and salmon-rearing streams have frequently been devastated by poor logging practices, careless road building, pulp mill pollution, and urban development. Economic pressures usually win out over biological needs, even when tiny changes in the temperature or quality of water can spell disaster for an entire salmon run. By the 1950s, the decline of British Columbia's wild salmon stocks had reached critical proportions. Scientists responded with a technical fix to improve on nature with artificial enhancement. The government built elaborate swimways and enormous hatcheries wherever salmon populations were in trouble. The world's largest system of spawning channels was constructed on the Fulton River to help Skeena sockeye find their way home. Although enhancement caused some salmon stocks to surge, it created new problems of its own.
The ideal enhancement measure is one that interferes as little as possible with the natural lifestyle of the fish, if you like, so that habitat protection and habitat improvement are the safest way to go. That way you get natural stocks of fish and they are reproducing naturally. The more you get away from the natural life, the greater is the risk that you're going to expose the animals to disease, you're going to change the genetic structure of the population. As far as possible, you should invest your effort in habitat protection, habitat enhancement. Things of that kind are much to be preferred to concrete palaces for raising fish to be sent out to sea.
As a public relations gesture, hatcheries have served the Department of Fisheries well. By pumping up populations of target species for the commercial fleet, DFO has been able to sidestep its responsibility for managing wild stocks. As long as the nets are full, fishermen don't care whether the salmon were hatched in a tray. But over time, the biological cost of artificial enhancement is seen in a gradual erosion of the wild gene pool.